Malik for the last witnesses on the youth employment study. I would remind all members that you have the option to choose to participate in the official language of your choice. If there's an issue with interpretation, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it's being corrected. The clerk has advised the witnesses appearing virtually have been sound tested and have passed. Again, I would remind those in the room to place your devices on silent mode, and please refrain from touching the microphone boom. It can cause popping and be harmful to our interpreters. Please direct all questions through I, the chair, and wait until I recognize you by name before proceeding. We have 3 witnesses this afternoon. Each have 5 minutes or less to make an opening statement. I will begin with Mr. Bizarro, who is coordinator for Movement Autonome et Solidaire des Sans-Emploi. We have Syed Hussein, Executive Director from the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, and Mr. Mikhail Skuzarud, Professor, Department of Economics, University of Waterloo, appearing as an individual. We will begin with Mr. Bizarro. Mr. Bizarro, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Mikhail Bizarro, and I am co-coordinator of the Mouvement Autonome et Solidaire des Sans-Emploi, Autonomous Solidarity Movement for the Unemployed. Thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of our organization as part of your study on youth employment in Canada. For over 25 years, MES has been defending the right to accessible, fair, universal, and non-discriminatory unemployment insurance. We represent 17 groups that defend the rights of unemployed workers across Quebec. Today, we want to draw your attention to a generation of young workers who, despite when they are able to participate in the labor market, too often find themselves excluded from essential protection, as do many other categories of claimants. Today's young people are growing up in a world where non-standard jobs are becoming increasingly common, part-time, seasonal, contract, or on-demand work. According to a Desjardins study from 2025, young people aged 15 to 24 work part-time even though they don't wish to, 4 times more than the average for other age groups. They pay into the EI system, but often have no access to it when they lose their jobs because they cannot accumulate the number of hours required to be eligible. This illustrates the obsolescence of the current system, which is based on unfair eligibility criteria, regional unemployment rates, total exclusion in cases of voluntary departure or misconduct, or even ineligibility for benefits simply for choosing to become a mother and losing one's job during or shortly after parental leave. On September 8th, Mark Carney's government announced the extension of temporary employment insurance support measures until April 11th, 2026, introducing 20 weeks of additional benefits for long-tenured workers while removing the artificial 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate, a measure that had improved access to the system. While we recognize that this extension will help thousands of workers affected by the trade war with the United States, we are concerned about the use of the long-tenured worker category to determine eligibility. This distinction fuels prejudice against claimants and automatically excludes workers in seasonal industries, young people, those in precarious employment, and newcomers. In other words, this measure does nothing to help those who are still unable to qualify for benefits or who work where there's a lot of turnover. We also see a troubling tendency to blame immigration for rising youth unemployment. While it is true that the rules have been relaxed for non-permanent residents in order to address labor shortages, we must not lose sight of the economic context, the tariff war, the transformation of work, and the rise of artificial intelligence. These are the factors that are currently holding back youth employment. We believe that the current situation is primarily the result of a weakened labor market, where non-standard and on-demand work dominate. We therefore urge the government to adopt structural measures to improve access to unemployment insurance for young people and de facto for everyone, rather than looking for scapegoats. For MAS, the solution lies in a thorough reform of the employment insurance system. There's a crisis in the labor market for young people, and there needs to be adequate protection. Here's what we recommend. A universal eligibility threshold of 350 hours or 13 weeks worked, regardless of region, employment status, or gender. 50 weeks of benefits to ensure minimum stability and reduce the black hole experienced by workers in seasonal industries. A benefit rate of at least 70% of income, with a minimum of $500 per week to prevent the impoverishment of claimants. These measures would finally allow unemployment insurance to be a form of social protection rather than a measure exclusively for good workers. Finally, we believe that a thorough review of the system cannot be limited to the issue of eligibility for younger workers, and consider that a comprehensive reform of the unemployment insurance system must be part of a broader effort to ensure universal accessibility and to combat discrimination. In doing so, MAS calls for the immediate implementation of an accessible, fair, universal, and non-discriminatory unemployment insurance system. Thank you for your attention. I will be happy to answer your questions.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Bizarro.
His hand went down. Mr. Hussein, you had your hand up. Was there an issue?
I was struggling with hearing the interpretation, but it's working now. Thank you.
Okay. We will go to Mr. Scooterud for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Mikhail Scooterud. I'm a professor of economics at the University of Waterloo, the director of the Canadian Labour Economics Forum, and the Roger Phillips Scholar of Social Policy and fellow in residence at the C.D. Howe Institute. On my website, you'll find my disclosure statement. In it, I state, quote, "As a researcher, I deliberately avoid advocacy, as I believe I can contribute more by seeking and disseminating objective evidence than in advancing agendas. For this reason, I have throughout my career declined funding from all organizations with explicit advocacy mandates or private interests." End quote. What are the facts on youth unemployment? The unemployment rate of Canadians aged 15 to 24 now stands at 14.7%. That's up from a historic low of 9% in the summer of 2022, but essentially unchanged from 1 year ago. It's also similar to the rate in 2012, lower than rates in the 2009 to 2010 period, and lower than an entire period from 1992 to 2000. Two more facts worth noting. 54% of Canada's unemployed youth in the most recent data were full-time students, and 61% were looking for a part-time job. Are we in a crisis? No. A return to the historical norm looks to me more like where we're at. What doesn't explain the recent increase in youth unemployment? First, I've seen no clear evidence that it's being driven by generative AI technologies substituting the work that our youth do. I'm also convinced that post-pandemic growth in the temporary foreign worker program is not the main culprit, although it probably hasn't helped. TFW numbers are too small and concentrated in markets where Canadian youth are mostly not competing for jobs. Exceptional growth in the population of current and former international students is probably playing a bigger role, but those numbers have been in sharp decline since early 2024, yet youth unemployment remains elevated. So what does explain the increase? Between April 2022 and April 2025, the number of low-skill job vacancies, That is, jobs that require a high school diploma or less dropped from over 600,000 to less than 300,000. That's more than a 50% drop in 3 short years. Youth unemployment is not because young people are losing their jobs. It's because it has suddenly become much harder for young people to find a job. But is a decline in the demand for low-skilled labor a problem that the government should be worried about or trying to solve? Emphatically, no. In 2022, the dominant economic narrative in this country wasn't a youth and unemployment crisis, it was a labor shortage crisis. In hindsight, the government's efforts to address low-skilled labor shortages, especially on the immigration front, proved disastrous, to say the least. Labor market needs are a short-run business problem, not a problem governments need to solve. Tight, low-skilled labor markets should be celebrated and left for free, competitive markets to address through wage adjustments, labor mobility, and technological investments that boost labor productivity. What really matters for average economic well-being in the population is the mix of jobs that are done in the long run, which is determined by 2 main factors: technological change and labor supply. If you want a high-skill, high productivity, high wage economy, you need to prioritize boosting the average human capital of the population. On the immigration front, you do this by relying on a transparent, rules-based system that prioritizes the applicants who have the highest expected future earnings. On the education front, you do it by allowing slack, lower-skilled labor markets to incentivize young people to invest in their skills so they can better compete for higher-skilled jobs. In trying to do too much on both fronts, I worry that federal government policy will once again do more harm than good. Thanks again for the invitation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scooterud. We'll now go to Mr. Hussain for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Chair. I am the Executive Director of the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change. We are connected to tens of thousands of current and former international students, temporary foreign workers, refugees, and undocumented people across the country. We hear from them every day. It has been shocking to see how immigration has been scapegoated for youth unemployment. I'm here to set the record straight. The evidence, including from Bank of Canada, clearly does not support this claim. Let me review the claims that have been made right before you in this committee. 1. An argument has been made that temporary residents are taking retail and restaurant jobs from young people. This is just clear scapegoating. The federal government's own evaluation of the temporary foreign worker program found no evidence of job displacement or wage suppression nationally. Everyone knows that the vast majority of temporary foreign workers are in agriculture, care, trucking. These are not jobs that young people are getting their first jobs in. And as for international students causing youth unemployment, you only have to look at the data from 2021, where only 34% of study permit only holders had any employment income at all. That works out to around 211,000 international students reporting income compared to 2.3 million Canadian youth who were working that year. Even if every single one of those international students were directly competing with young Canadians, which is not how the labor market works, they're still less than 10% of the youth workforce. Another fact, during the recent GST/HST holidays, Restaurant Canada reported around 24,000 new food service jobs added, and yet food services still accounted for about 1 in 6 private sector job vacancies. If immigrants were crowding out youth for restaurant jobs, there would be no vacancies in this sector. But the reality is that restaurants cannot find enough workers. This is a demand problem, not enough consumers and employers not hiring, not a supply problem. Another argument you've heard is too many temporary residents are flooding the labor market. But the Bank of Canada in October 2024 examined why unemployment rose amongst youth and found that it was because of tightening monetary policy and falling job vacancies, not immigration. When interest rates rose, businesses pulled back on hiring. Youth are always getting squeezed out because they lack experience. This is true whether immigration is high or low. The third argument you've heard is that the population is growing faster than jobs. This assumes the economy is a sort of a fixed pie. More people, same pie, less to go around. But the IMF has shown that immigration increases output and productivity. So many studies have researched the incredible economic wealth that immigrants bring into our country. The Bank of Canada found that around 2.5 percentage points is added to the level of economic output because of immigration. And in fact, cutting immigration, as has happened over the last 2 years, has had a counter effect. A recent RBC analysis showed that reduced temporary migration over the 2 years before what was announced this week will shave nearly 1 percentage point off economic growth over the next 3 years and reduce government revenues by a cumulative $50 billion over 5 years starting in 2025. Another argument you've heard is youth unemployment is at 14.7%. This proves immigration caused it. But look, in 2024, the government cut temporary residence arrival by over 15%. An additional 1.2 million people couldn't renew study or work permits. Permanent residency was also reduced. If immigration were the primary driver of youth unemployment, then reducing it in 2024 should have lowered youth unemployment in 2025. Instead, youth unemployment rose. It is time to stop linking migration to youth unemployment. Doing so is pure fear-mongering and racist scapegoating. What is causing youth unemployment is monetary policy tightening, and it's a general slowdown in deindustrialization. We are in a downturn, and the past rate hikes is what's causing hiring slowdowns. But youth unemployment is a crisis. International students, temporary foreign workers, and immigrants did not cause it. Focusing on immigration, frankly, wastes time. Young people need help now, and the solution is simple. Canada needs a job strategy, and in it, a national youth workforce development strategy based on what the central bank's evidence actually shows. We also need to end the two-tier immigration system where some people get access to permanent residency while the rest do not, that allows employers and institutions to exploit our migrant neighbors and friends. A single-tier immigration system means permanent resident status for everyone in the country and is a labor market stabilization tool. It ensures that everyone has labor mobility, equal rights, security, and stability. And this is what will strengthen local economies and reduce unemployment. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. We will now go to the 6-minute round of questioning, beginning with Mr. Janos. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Hussain, could you just briefly outline your background in economics for the committee's benefit?
Sorry, I did not hear that question. Was that for me?
Could you just briefly outline your background in economics, any formal training you have in economics?
Yeah, I have a master's degree in social and political thought, and I also teach at the Monk School.
Political thought, okay. My
social and political thought,
okay.
Which includes political economy.
Okay.
Sorry,
political
are you
economy.
asking for my? I'm happy to send you my resume. I've been doing this for 15 years, sir.
Yeah.
And I teach at the Monk School of Public Policy.
I'm going to take my time back. Mr. Hussain, I wanted to just draw your attention. You repeatedly referenced Bank of Canada data. You did so inaccurately. I have in front of me a report from the Bank of Canada titled The Shift in Canadian Immigration Composition and Its Effect on Wages. I'll read you the abstract. It says, we document recent changes in Canadian immigration marked by an increased prevalence of temporary residency. Using microdata from Statistics Canada's Labour Force Survey, we show that temporary workers' characteristics and nominal wages have diverged from those of Canadian-born workers. Between 2015 and 2024, temporary workers have become younger, less experienced, and more likely to migrate from lower-income countries. As well, the shares of temporary workers in skilled occupations have declined moderately. Throughout this period, the average nominal wage gap between temporary and Canadian-born workers has more than doubled, widening from negative 9.5% to negative 22.6%. Further, we estimate commensurate regression to assess how these evolving characteristics have contributed to the growing wage gap. Our findings show that this increase can be explained by observable characteristics. Our results suggest that aggregate nominal wages would have been on average 0.7% higher in 23-24 had the characteristics of temporary workers remained unchanged over the past decade. That is the actual report of the Bank of Canada, and calling the many esteemed professors of economics who have appeared before this committee names simply because they have read the data correctly and they have a background in the subject doesn't exactly help to make your case. My next question will be for Mr.
Sorry,
Bizarro.
where was the question?
My next question is for Mr. Bizarro.
Mr. Chair, excuse me. Because of the pace of Mr. Genuis, the interpreters aren't able to do the interpretation. It's just too quickly. So when they don't have the text, could you go more slowly so I can follow? And to protect our interpreters, thank you.
Thank you. You have the floor, Mr. Genis.
Thank you, Chair. My next question is for Mr. Bizzarro. Mr. Bizzarro, you've proposed making EI easier to acquire and increasing benefits. I'm curious if you think EI premiums should increase as well.
Oui, en effet.
Thank you for the question. First, as you know well, for a number of years now, premiums from the employer and from employees, in the past, premiums were three parts.
Very briefly, do you think that EI premiums should increase?
There should be a third team taking part in premiums, so the government should pay premiums.
Okay, so you're proposing that EI premiums not increase, but that the government supplement the EI fund from other sources of revenue.
That it would add to the two other groups that pay into the system, yes.
Professor Scooter, you talked about a number of different issues in your testimony. You mentioned in passing impact of international student labor on unemployment levels. Mr. Hassan disputed your claims in that regard. Do you want to say a bit more about why you think, in particular, that very high levels of international students coming into the country has impacted the competition for entry-level positions?
Because that's what the data says. I mean, this is what I've been doing for 20 years. I've been studying the economics of immigration. You know, I very much wish what Mr. Hassan says was true. I would like that to be true. I'm an immigrant. I'm very pro-immigration. I wish that was true. But as I said in my opening statement, I'm not driven by agendas. I mean, this is very genuine. I go into the data. I set up the data in a way that I might get the wrong answer that I don't like, and I tie my hands and we look at the data. We're working on a project now with what's called the SEED database that links immigration data, T1 tax returns, T4s, and employer T2s. So you see where people work. It shows up in the data. The question is not whether these effects exist. It's how big are they? And so it's not a binary question. And I completely agree with Mr. Hussain that, you know, the increase in the youth unemployment rate is, you know, largely, overwhelmingly driven by the drop in labor demand, by the drop in job vacancies. But there's also no doubt in my mind that increasing temporary foreign worker numbers or international student numbers at a time when unemployment is rising is not smart policy. The optics are bad. It undermines public confidence in immigration. That's not good.
And I want to emphasize, nobody here has ever claimed that immigration is the only factor. We've said that problems in the economy, problems in immigration, problems in training, as well as some of the challenges around moving to where jobs are. And our plan addresses all of those points. But to suppose for ideological reasons that there are no effects whatsoever of immigration on employment, that's clearly putting ideology ahead of economic science. And every single economics professor we've had before the committee has made the point that there are real issues in terms of immigration that a dispassionate, pro-pluralism, pro-immigration member of parliament should look at and take seriously.
Thank you, Mr. Genis. And I would remind those appearing to witness virtually to keep your cameras on at all time when you're appearing before the committee. We'll go to Madame de Rocher pour 6 minutes.
Merci, merci. 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hussain, I'd like to apologize for the way my colleague seemed to attack your position. I think he disagreed with what you said. And I don't agree with the way you were treated. I know you've invested time to be here with the committee today. I thank you for appearing. Listen.
Talked about the contribution of immigration to economic growth.
Point of order, Chair.
Clearly state your point
I
of
just
order.
want to apologize on behalf of Mr. Rochier for her comments that were inappropriate.
Janice, that's not a point of order, and you know it. Mr. Rochier.
We're all apologetic here. Okay, we're all apologizing. Parfait. So thank you for raising the contribution of immigration to economic growth, which really, I think, was at the center. And I think what every government always tried to do is to how do we spur economic growth, right? Which was at the center of how the Harper government, of what the commitment the Harper government took in 2014 to sharply increase international students, to double skilled immigration. I remember because I was there working in the public service and implementing those policies, and those were great policies, and we have built on that in the years following that. So what I'm curious about is if you've looked at earlier this week, we tabled our budget 2025, great document. It creates a $40 million Youth Climate Corp, which will provide paid training for youth in climate resilience and emergency response. Do you think like initiatives like this help vulnerable and racialized youth sort of get their first work experience?
Thank you for that. I think just briefly, the Youth Climate Corps program is a great first step. It's something that many climate groups have been calling for. My understanding is that it's too small. There are about a few hundred spots in it, so I think it's a great first step, but there needs to be way more spots in it. But this kind of matching youth with jobs is a much better approach than obsessing over immigration in response to polling that the Conservative Party has been doing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Hussain. Then I'm going to turn to Mr. Sturudik. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Skuderud. Merci beaucoup. So I'm curious about, well, so again, thanks for your comment on a temporary foreign worker and the tenuous link. And I agree with what you said, like it's not smart policy to continue bringing temporary residents when we already have, when the unemployment is rising. And I think we've taken steps, including in early 2024 and summer of 2024 and fall of 2024, to send a lot of signals, reduce international students, to reduce number of temporary foreign workers, to reduce immigration levels. So I think, we're trending towards that now. I'm just curious, you said like the low stats around job vacancies went from 600,000 to less than 300,000. Like, what are some of the drivers? Are there just less job out there or just less job vacancies? Is it the overall, like, less first entry job? You're on mute.
Two things. First, I don't think it's right to say that, or at least I hope I didn't suggest that it's a tenuous link. It is not a tenuous link. The idea that immigration can have adverse impacts in labor markets where natives are competing with new immigrants is not tenuous. That's a very, very strong finding in the labor economics literature. It really isn't tenuous. So that's the first thing. The second
Yeah, I was referring
question,
to the foreign worker program. But yes.
No, so the ESDC, this is a study that was sort of buried. ESDC sponsored a group of academic researchers that do economics to study the effect of Canada's temporary foreign worker program. That is a working paper with the Canadian Labour Economics Forum, where I'm a director. It's a free paper, you can go read it. That paper showed, using Canadian data, the most recent data we have, that these crowding out effects exist. That's ESDC's own research that they paid for, that they supported. Anyways, this is not tenuous. I know I would like that the result to be true, but just ignoring the truth doesn't get us anywhere. That's not helpful. On on your second question, the 600,000 job vacancies down to 300,000. Those are jobs that require high school or less. That's what ESDC calls a low skill job. That 600,000 number was exceptionally high. That was an historic high. You shouldn't look at where we're at now as an incredible low. What we've done is we've returned more to where we were. It was after the pandemic, for various reasons, which I could get into, but you probably don't want me to. There was just a tremendous growth in labor demand for low-skilled labor. Tremendous growth. That's the way to think about this, I think. And we've just sort of returned to normal since then.
Just one more question. So in terms of the programs we currently have, like the youth employment strategy, the union training, all of those things, do you think those are effective at getting young people their first job, which is, I think we've heard from other witnesses, crucial for them to remain employed?
Sorry, is that a question for me?
Yes, it's a question for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, government programs that create jobs for young people or subsidize wages, like in summer employment programs for young people, sure, those are helpful, but they have opportunity costs. Every dollar spent in a government program to create a job is a dollar not spent somewhere else in the economy. And so that's what you have to think about. What are those trade-offs?
Thank you. Madame Gill, for
6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses with us, sharing their work, their expertise, and their experience. The study is broad. There are issues that we are shedding more light on, but it's very broad. There are a lot of nuances. And I would have liked to hear you talk about, for example, temporary foreign workers. You talked about studies. Would we say that Quebec and Canada are very big? I'm from Côte-Nord in Quebec, and the demographics are negative. There's specialized and non-specialized work, jobs that aren't being filled, and that is slowing down development of industry. So do studies take that into account? It can be different, it can be relative, based on different places. Mr. Bizarro, the whole issue of employment insurance, where it doesn't break down the same way everywhere. We need to have nuance in our comments for the well-being of everyone, because it varies from place to place. So, Mr. Bizarro, could you talk more about this? You talked about principles of justice, universality, and accessibility, of course. For employment insurance, Louis Chabot, my former colleague, the member for Louis Chabot, had tabled a bill on employment insurance to make it universal, accessible, and fair. I'd like to have examples, concrete examples. Sometimes we go from the general to the individual, but that can inform us on what needs to be done for young people. And we need to break things down. This is broader than just employment insurance for the regions, as with temporary foreign workers. So, Mr. Bizarro. Thank you for the question. An example that could be put forward. We know that young people, most young people, there's a large proportion working part-time, even though they would like to work full-time. With EI, it's supposed to be a social protection for all. We know that to qualify for EI benefits, you need to have worked enough hours to qualify, and part-time work for young people or for women who are workers who are often forced to work part-time, it's more difficult for them to meet that threshold. So we would propose reducing the number of hours to qualify for EI programs to 350 hours or 13 weeks of work. We think that in that way, whether it's part-time work or full-time work, there shouldn't necessarily be a distinction with the type of work to qualify for EI benefits, given the fact that each worker pays into employment insurance. So that's a specific aspect. You talked about your region, where the seasonal industry and seasonal workers are faced year after year with situations where they don't qualify for EI benefits because their industry closes before they've accumulated enough hours. We see it currently. There are some industries that are closing earlier than usual because of climate change, forest fires, so the season is cut in half or shortened considerably. So those workers, generally, when they are able to qualify for EI, they can fall into the black hole. Groups that defend the unemployed talk about the black hole. It's a time when workers have access to EI, but their benefits end, but their industry hasn't started back up again. So they have a few weeks, sometimes 5 weeks, 6 weeks, or 2 or 3 months where they don't have any income, simply because benefits haven't kept up, haven't gone on for the time of their work stoppage. So what we would propose to remedy that is to immediately have 15 additional weeks for those workers. They would qualify as seasonal workers. And ultimately what we want is 50 weeks of benefits for each and every worker who is left unemployed, so that every person can find new work, or those who work in the seasonal industry, that they can get through that difficult period, not fall into the black hole, and they can help the industry start back up again. Thank you. That was a number of examples. But we will retable the bill, and there are other impacts on studies for young people and keeping young people in our regions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Madame Gill. Mr. Reynolds for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for coming today. Appreciate all being here. My first question is for Mr. Bizzarro. So, myself, being in the construction industry for almost 20 years, I have been on and off EI many times through training, through periods of unemployment. My question for you is, you're proposing that we lower the threshold for employment insurance benefits. I have personally experienced people that would rather be on unemployment or employment insurance than go to work. So my question to you is, if we're lowering the threshold for benefits and extending the benefit periods, how do we protect the employment insurance system from abuse?
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you for the question once again. This is a question that comes up pretty regularly when we talk about benefits for the unemployed. I'd like to note that every year, programs, or rather, I'm looking for the exact term, the report by the Commission every year, it says about 1% of claimants commit EI fraud. We are trying to find gains for the unemployed that would be for the most people who have access to these benefits, and many of them face discrimination. That 1% of unemployed people who might be called people committing fraud, that's a small number, and we don't want to focus on that potential fraud instead of looking for gains for the other people.
Thank you. When that study was done and refers to fraud, my assumption would be that fraud would be somebody who's collecting benefits but maybe working in earning cash on the side. I don't know can you confirm that the fraud is the same as somebody who just is not trying very hard to get a job? Because I don't know if that would be fraudulent.
Les règles.
The rules to have access as a claimant, they're the same for all unemployed people in Canada. You have to look for a job. You have to declare income every 2 weeks. The rules are set out by the EI Commission and they work. I don't think the prejudices of some workers. I'll restart my sentence. If there are prejudices of some workers who are trying to take advantage of the system, well, it's the Commission that set out the rules to maintain control of those benefits. So in our view, it works very well.
Okay, thank you. My next question will be for sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Mr. Skuderud? Thank you. What lessons can we learn from our past or from other OECD countries that would help us tackle the rise in youth employment here in Canada?
Well, I mean, I think that Mr. Hassan and I have both sort of pointed to the same factor, that we coming out of the pandemic, there was a very big increase in price inflation. Prices were increasing a lot faster than labor costs. That gives companies margins. When the prices you can sell things at are rising faster than what you have to pay your workers, there's profit margins. That increases labor demand. Now the incentive is to produce a whole lot more, to hire more workers, these low-skilled workers. So you had this huge increase in labor demand. And then there was a lot of hyperbolic talk about a labor shortage crisis, much of it driven by a business lobby. And the government responded to that by doing things like removing any restrictions on the number of hours that international students work, which we've seen in the data. I mean, I've had a student that worked on this with the labor force survey, very clearly increased the amount of labor market, off-campus labor market activity of international students. And so now that all sort of blew up, and now we're sort of coming back to another point because the Bank of Canada has now put the brakes on inflation. So we're in a bit of a cycle. And so every time we move in
You can follow up at a later time. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. We went over a bit. Ms. Fancy for 5 minutes or less.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for all, through you, Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for today for their testimony, and I'll put the disclaimer out there. If you have more to say outside of the time or parameters we're giving you today, please don't hesitate to write things up and send them along through our clerk. I'd like to start with Mr. Bizzarro. Welcome, Mr. Bizzarro. So Mr. Bizzarro, you've long argued that young and seasonal workers need stronger transitions between training and stable employment. I'm saying this in where I have a rural riding in Nova Scotia. So I'm asking, how can the $307.9 million Youth Employment and Skills Strategy, our YES program, which provides mentorship and mental health support for over 20,000 youth annually, help bridge that gap for young Quebecers, and as well as people from maybe my riding entering today's labor market?
Pardon, Madame Fancy.
Excuse me. Inaudible. I can't hear. The interpreter cannot hear the witness. The microphone is too high.
Monsieur Bizzarro, on vous entend pas.
Mr. Bizzarro, we can't hear you.
Yes.
Désolé, pardon.
Excuse me. Excuse me, Ms. Fancy. The interpretation cut out, and I missed part of your question. I'm sorry.
Could I reclaim my time very quickly, Chair? Okay, I'll be quick. Just wanting to know what your take on our youth employment and skills strategy is that helps provide mentorship and mental health support for over 20,000 youth, and how that can help bridge the gap for young people entering today's labor market force. Thank you.
Si j'ai bien compris.
If I've understood your question correctly, you'd like to know what our position is on mental health care for those young people entering the workforce?
Yes, please. For 1 minute.
Oui, désolé.
I'm sorry. That's not a position we have currently at my group. I wouldn't want to respond.
To turn my attention then to Mr. Hussain. Welcome, Mr. Hussain. I'd like to give you the time today. In your beginning, you had mentioned possible solutions, because we're about solutions here and how do we bolster our programs here within government. So I'd like to give you a minute or so to discuss. You had mentioned about a national youth job development strategy. So I'm looking for what are some of your ideas about that possible strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just very quickly, I've been racking my brain about this study that was referenced earlier about the Bank of Canada, and I realize what it is, and it's clearly a misreading if you don't have proper economics training. That study says that there is wages would have been 0.7% higher if the characteristics of temporary workers had not changed. No, absolutely. I understand that's all you read. So if the characteristics of temporary workers had not changed, they would be 0.7% higher if the characteristics...
Try to respect the decorum of the meeting, Mr. Genis.
So it's basically this. What the report said is that if the temporary workers had not changed, then the wages would have been 0.7% higher. It does not say that there has been wage suppression, and also 0.7% is very low. It's not causation. It's that it would have been mechanically lower on average. That's what it is. So please, it would be helpful. Go to ChatGPT, maybe.
Wonderful.
Now,
thank you, Mr. Hussain. So, Mr. Hussain, we're going to put the train back on the tracks here.
Yes, thank you.
In terms of policy development or policy tightening, I'm wondering what you could tell us about policy tightening that you had mentioned within your introductory remarks. Thank you.
In terms of the youth development strategy, I think for us, we have to understand that international students, temporary foreign workers, migrant workers, and immigrants are part of the Canadian labor market. Everyone who works in Canada is part of the labor market. So instead of pitting migrants against youth, we need a strategy that includes both. And for migrants, that means permanent resident status. Part of the problem is that people can be exploited more because they don't have equal immigration rights. We need a single-tier society where everyone is the same, has the ability to leave bad jobs, has the ability to stand up for their rights. So that would be a major step forward. I can send a fuller proposal in writing later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hussain. And for the remainder of my time, I'd like to give you the opportunity to expand on anything else that you've heard throughout this testimony today. Thank you.
Me? Oh, yes, of course. I think the other thing is Mr. Scootred, for example, continues to bring up data, but, causation is not is not caused by correlation. As I explained, 34% of international students were working in 2021, which is when this 20-hour work limit was removed. That does it. So high rates of international students does not have a direct causation. Similarly, temporary foreign workers are working in agriculture and care. They're not working in youth jobs. Thank you.
Mr. Hussain. I allow everybody to go over the allotted time. But if that doesn't work, then we'll stop everybody at the allotted times. But Madame Gill, pour 2 minutes.
Ms. Gill, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much time. I have a last question for Mr. Bizarro on the impacts of the fact that there hasn't been a reform. There are holes in the EI system, impacts on young people in relation to our study, those trying to enter the labor force, those who want to complete their studies. So over to you. Yes, thank you, Ms. Gill. We think that employment insurance needs to be real social protection, which initially was the goal with this program. It's to provide social protection for all Canadians. Young people are included, whether they are new to the labor market, whether they're studying, whether they're part-time, men or women. They all have a right to access the employment insurance program, and it needs to begin with better accessibility to that program. So we think it's not because recently, it's not because you're new to the labor market that you're studying at the same time as you're working that you shouldn't have access to EI, because you are paying in. So I think it's important. I don't want to interrupt you. My question is there a correlation, a direct link for some young people who are studying? Myself, I went to Montreal and I studied, I paid for my apartment, I had to work. If something happens, we don't want to have to stop studying. And the same goes for work. So is there a correlation, in your view, a risk of a young person not being able to continue studying or working because of problems with the EI system? Yes, I understand your question now. Thank you, Ms. Gill. In fact, we think programs like this one can encourage young people to complete their projects, their goals. If a choice has to be made between paying rent and continuing to study, unfortunately, most students will choose to work full-time to pay their bills. We think it's important for students to continue their studies and for us to have high-quality employees later on. Thank you.
I'm going to jump there for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd love to direct my questions to Professor Skuterud, and thank you so much for your testimony, sir. I've really appreciated having a chance to see you as a first-time caller, long-time fan here. My first question is, based on your research and your work, should immigration policy be informed by economic outcomes?
Could you rephrase the question? I don't know what economic outcomes means.
Should immigration policy factor in economic outcomes?
Again, I'm quite honest. I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't know what the question is.
Labor market needs, the way in which our economy functions, filling in gaps.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll try to answer. I don't know how much time I have, so it's kind of hard to answer these questions because I don't want to get cut off halfway through. But I mean, the crux of the problem is that Canadian immigration policy on the economic front is trying to do too much. There's a principle called the Tinbergen principle in economics that if you have more policy objectives than policy instruments, you're going to make a mess of the whole thing. And that's exactly what's happened on the immigration front. We're trying to do everything. We're trying to populate areas where Canadians, young people don't want to live, that have been bleeding young people for decades. We're trying to meet low-skill labor market needs, and we're trying to drive economic growth. And these objectives are not well aligned. And you have kind of a single policy lever. So when you try to push on one objective, you make the other one worse off in the whole. And so we've created a real mess.
Thank you. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to go on to the second question. I appreciate your response there. Could you discuss the myth of labor shortage and what labor oversupply does to wage growth, particularly for young people?
So I've encouraged the 700 Econ 101 students to watch this today, that I taught today. We teach what a shortage is in a market. It's when there's more demand than supply at the given price. So when markets when there are labor shortages, it means quite simply, by definition, that the price is too low. So if there are labor shortages, it means wages are too low. The way to deal with them is to let a free market do what it's good at, reallocate, and competition for scarce workers will drive the wage up, lead to new investments in productivity, and increases in wages will lower demand and increase supply. It's that simple. That's what happens. But when you get government interventions that can, make first best outcomes worse, and that is what we've seen in recent years.
Exactly. Free markets, equality of opportunity, merit. In that context, sir, what do you think the impact of DEI policies have been for young workers?
Depends who you are, I suppose. I know people that have benefited from those programs, and I also know people that have probably been harmed by those programs. They have distributional effects.
In what sense do you see the downsides of pursuing those types of government interventions that get in the way of equality of opportunity and focus more instead on equality of outcomes?
Well, I mean, at the University of Waterloo, there are job vacancies that very clearly exclude eligibility of certain groups. Those people just aren't eligible for the job. And so if that's a job that I otherwise would have competed for and I'm no longer eligible because there's a DEI program, then clearly I'll be worse off.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I think that it undermines human dignity and professional accomplishment when those types of subjective pressures are placed in the marketplace for any profession. Thank you for your courage in saying that. Now, I have about a minute left with you, so I'll ask this. You've said that permanent immigration isn't about meeting today's labor needs, but rather about long-term productivity.
Just
do you believe
if I could
the government?
pause for a moment, Mr. Jim. The bells are ringing. I need unanimous consent to continue. We would have one more after you. Do we have unanimous consent? We have no unanimous consent, so with that, thank you. Thank you, witnesses. The meeting is adjourned because of a vote call in the House of Commons. So thank you for appearing, and meeting adjourned. Adjourned.